Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening and welcome to Talking Point here on Hilaal TV channel 347. My name is Faraz Patel. I'll be in your company till just before 9 o'clock. Now, on Monday was another May Day rally. We celebrated Workers' Day. And President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his role as the president of the African National Congress, addressed workers in Bethlehem, Free State. It basically was a copy and paste of what he has been saying for the last few years, and a copy and paste of what he said last year at the Royal Bafokeng Sports Palace in Rustenburg. The only difference was he was not booed out from the stage, which happened last year. Now, the question we ask ourselves is there really any improvement with regards to the rights of workers and the unemployment rate, which currently stands at 32.7%? On the half a glass full scenario, one may say it went down by 0.2% in the fourth quarter, but 32.7 still remains quite high. Now, joining me to discuss this, and in a bit, we'll be joined by the NUM's media officer, Luphert Chilwane. But to kickstart the conversation, I'd like to bring in labor analyst Terry Bell. Mr. Bell, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us here on Talking Point.
Good evening, Faraz.
Mr. Bell, I listened to the speech on Monday, and again, there was really a lack of conviction from my side in what President Ramaphosa was saying. Again, there was a united front from COSATU and the SACP. I just want your take on the speech. Any convincing from your side?
Well, I think you summed it up when you said cut and paste. That's exactly what it was. We've heard it all before. Why it was in Bethlehem, I don't know, because earlier this year I drove past that part of the world, and my goodness, I don't know whether there are no roads there, they're just potholes you have to avoid all the way. So presumably he was helicoptered in, I don't know. But no, there was nothing, absolutely nothing that we could have gained from what he said. What was interesting was the unity stressed by the Communist Party and COSATU, when in fact COSATU and most of its affiliates are being taken to court by another of its affiliates, the South African Democratic Teachers Union, because COSATU and the other affiliates, led by the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union, appears to have railroaded through a decision that they will support not the ANC, but the Communist Party or a, quote, socialist alliance in the coming election. So once again, we had another bit of contradiction, shall we say?
And that is it, the problem, isn't it? Contradiction upon contradiction, because it's quite clear, Mr. Bell, that members of the ANC, the top seven, those who hold high positions as ministers, are slowly starting to lose touch with the people on the ground. And I'm going to stress this number again, 32.7 is the unemployment rate. And it just seems as if there is no plan to go ahead and address this challenge that is facing the country.
Well, don't forget the figure you're quoting is perfectly correct from Stats SA, but that's the basic unemployment rate. It's not the expanded definition. To be employed, all you have to do is work for 1 hour in the past week and you're employed, whether you're paid for it or not. That's the definition of unemployment. So let's get on to the expanded definition, which is over 40%. But then if you regard someone, say, for example, sitting on a street corner, picking up an odd job once a week or so, or even selling a few oranges on the street corner, they're regarded as employed. I regard that as hidden unemployment. If you add those people, we're probably close to half the working population unemployed. And when you look, and this is official Stats SA figures, at youth unemployment from 15 to just under 30 or up to 25, in some areas it's up to 70 and 80%. So, I mean, there is absolutely nothing to celebrate. The only minor celebration that came about for May Day last year, last week, I beg your pardon, was that for 27 years we've been waiting for them to amend Section 76 of the Labour Relations Act. When that law came in, in 1995, some of us called it a scabs charter because it allowed for replacement labor, scab labor. And we said it's a contradiction because either you have the constitutional right for workers to strike, the only power that they have, the only leverage that they have, you either give that to them in the Constitution or you don't, and you cannot take it away with another piece of labor legislation. And that legislation has hung on until last week. That's the only good bit of news on the labor front for the whole of, well, I would imagine this year.
Mr. Bell, there were two points that were taken, I took from the speech, which I'm trying to understand whether, how much responsibility government needs to take on its shoulders. The one, of course, that we all know, the current energy crisis. But the other, and I'm going to address the current energy crisis in a bit, the one is the lack of investment within South Africa. Now, is South Africa still an environment for investment to come in? Because there are many amendments or constitutional reforms that don't allow for investment to be made within South Africa, or the investment that the government wants within South Africa to happen. So, is South Africa still, as we speak at this very moment, investor friendly, given all the challenges that are here?
Well, it's not even a question of investor friendly. Even if we had the best sort of investment friendly outlook, we now have the level of corruption. We have, above all else, the whole situation regarding energy and Eskom. You cannot run a modern society without reliable electrical power, which we do not have. And it looks as though we're going to be in this mess for the next 2 or 3 years at the very least. So, of course, no investment. Of course, however, we also have a great amount of wealth in terms of mineral wealth, etc., which will continue. The mines will look after themselves with wind power, solar power, etc., and continue to make money and take money out of the country. But as regards developing our economy and creating more jobs, no. But that's also a factor of the modern development within society, the technological advance. We've been advancing technologically at an incredible pace. That's globally, not just South Africa, which means that more and more work is being done productively by fewer and fewer people. More and more jobs are becoming redundant. Even, for example, economists and accountants, chartered accountants now, many of them are finding it rather difficult to find work because so much can now be done using algorithms, using artificial intelligence. Now, this is something the unions need to take cognizance of. They haven't. They're still thinking in terms of the mid-20th century or even earlier, fighting for better pay, better conditions in the present circumstances without looking ahead, without organizing the unorganized. There are some signs now, especially among younger activists, that they're beginning to organize within what we call the gig economy, the business of people who hopefully pick up an hour's work here, a day's work there, a week here, a month there, whatever, never having no security. It's precarious work. They're starting to become organized, not only here. I believe there's a good example in Germiston. I haven't yet examined it. And in other countries, particularly the United States and in Britain and other parts of Europe, they are beginning to organize along those lines. In other words, the traditional trade unions seem to have failed most of the modern young workers. And you also then have the non-governmental sector stepping in. And that's the last thing you want, is to have the NGO business getting into unions. Unions should be organized by workers, for workers, be totally democratic, their leaderships totally accountable.
Mr. Bell, the energy crisis, because I have to stress on that because it is the one problem that plagues this country. Now, just the other day we heard Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy and his role as the chairperson of the ANC, Mr. Gwede Mantashe, saying that the ANC cannot solely be blamed for the energy crisis. And then you have his sort of a little tiff with the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. If we have leadership having issues with regards to the energy crisis, surely we as the citizens need to look at this and be slightly worried if not worried at best?
Well, not just slightly worried. I'm quite terrified sometimes when I look at the situation. Who's running the show? Obviously, the president's not. He makes one statement. We're leaving for example, the International Criminal Court. Then, very couple of hours later, the ANC says, no, 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 we're not. And then his spokesperson comes up and says there was some sort of error of communication. Doesn't mean a thing. They contradict one another left, right, and center. We have an energy situation where we now have an electricity minister in Ramakgopa. We have Gwedi Mantashe as minerals. We have Pravin Gordhan as private enterprises. Who is actually running the show, if anyone? I think there are so many contradictions. We should be terrified by what is going on. And the thing is, with an election looming, there's every likelihood that politicians will do anything to try to look better, in the process of which they'll probably make a bigger mess of things.
Yeah, well, one ship going in the Indian Ocean, the other one in the Atlantic, the other one heading into the Red Sea. Who knows if they're ever going to sail in the right direction? We'll be back after the break here on Talking Point, and we'll be bringing in Luphert Chilwane into the conversation. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. We are continuing the conversation on the May Day rally that just happened 2 days ago and focusing on the challenges workers in South Africa face right now. Now, let me bring into the conversation Luphert Chilwane. He is the media officer for the National Union of Metal Workers. Luphert, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's a media officer for the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that correction, Luphert. Much appreciated. Luphert, I wanted to get your take on President Cyril Ramaphosa's May Day rally. Anything that convinced you from it?
Well, what I can say in response to what the president said is that we are used to such speeches. As trade unions, I cannot say we are convinced on that. Reason being that I'm just going to take few examples. We are talking about public sector workers who are currently without being paid their salaries, their wage increases. So such talks, we are used to them. And as National Union of Mine Workers, we are organizing in energy, which is ESCOM. And the same thing, it's likely to happen to us as we are currently engaged in wage talks with ESCOM. So we are used to such talks. We are really not really convinced in any way.
The NUM take on unemployment at the moment, 32.7%. That's the stat that we have been given from Stats SA. And just before this, I was talking to Mr. Bell, and he said that, this is a figure that could be taken 40% or even more. How is this going to be addressed? Because, this is Q4 figures, and we still need to get the Q1 figures from Stats SA. And it's more likely than not to probably increase from that. How worried should we be as South Africans that this figure may just go up? And how do we address the unemployment issue within the country?
You see, it is really unfortunate, and it is really very sad, to see such kind of figures coming up. Instead of going down, they keep on increasing. So you can see that there is a problem. There is a major problem. We are hearing government coming up with this, saying that they will create jobs, coming up with that, saying they will create jobs. At this point, we are not seeing anything. We are very much worried as trade unions that there is no job increase. We are seeing the situation remaining, even going back to worse. So, yeah, well, we are really, really concerned as trade unions.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is adamant that he can still somehow rescue South Africa from the unemployment crisis that we are in at the moment. There are many that say he's probably lost touch with the ground, with the citizens of South Africa, with those who currently sit without jobs. What is NUM's take on it? Is there a feeling that he may, right now at this very moment, be out of touch with the country and especially those who are still looking for jobs in South Africa?
Look, I'm going to say this. Like as trade union, as NUM, like we are sitting with a challenge right now. Like we received a retrenchment notice from various mining companies. For instance, Sibanye Stillwater is actually coming up to say they are going to retrench somewhere around 3,000 workers. You see, like it's going to add on the number that we are talking about. Like as we are sitting right now, we are busy in talks trying to mitigate that, trying to prevent that to happen. So now generally we are talking about unemployment generally. So it's just that the situation is not getting really better. It's getting really very serious and it's overwhelming. And like as I'm saying, we are currently engaged in wage talks with Eskom, which of course they've came up like very angry. We don't know the reasons why they are angry with workers, but we are likely to see to see a situation where we are going to fight again in terms of having our members being threatened with retrenchment or disciplinary actions. So the situation is not getting. It is even worse. We expected things to be better, but at the moment we are talking about situation that is growing every day. So, well, in terms of how the president is going to work on around that, well, definitely we are monitoring the situation. We are actually hoping that at the end of the tunnel there will be a light.
What role does government need to play in making sure, Luphert, that retrenchments or future retrenchments are halted? Because, I mean, if there's any other stakeholder that can stop these multinational companies from mass retrenchments, it is government. So, from an MUM perspective, what is the plea to government to sort of intervene in this? Because I know that the role of trade unions is to make sure that either number one, these retrenchments don't happen, or either number two, if they do happen, worst case scenario, it's done in a way which is favorable to the employee. So what role does government need to do in order to make sure that this is mitigated in some way?
You see, companies, especially private companies that are coming up with businesses here up in South Africa, they are just doing as they please. And we are failing to understand why they are doing that. And we are really saying exactly the government must do something. I'm not sure what exactly is that they can do, but I do believe that they can do something to make the country's law very stricter, so that it can actually, instead of favoring those private companies, it must actually favor the employees, because we are talking about people who are willing to work anywhere whether in the private or in any way, they are willing to work. But as we speak right now, those private companies are doing things the way they like. It seems as if there is no strong laws that actually prohibit them to do as they please. So it should be like the government should actually come up with some stricter laws that can actually regulate those private companies that are willing to invest in the country, that are willing to do businesses in the country.
Before we go to the break, Luphert, it's a question I asked Mr. Bell earlier on. The energy crisis, I think we don't even need to over-exaggerate the situation. We've got three different portfolios that are dealing with it: the Minister of Energy, Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, and the Minister of Public Enterprises. Each of them are saying three different things. In a situation like this, how worried should we be as citizens with regards to the energy crisis? And from a labor union perspective, what is the way forward to address the energy crisis when you have three different portfolios managing such an important issue in this country need to be sailing in the right direction?
Look, yes, it is true that we are sitting now with three ministers who are actually, in one way or another, overseeing the energy in South Africa. So you can remember we did issue a statement as the National Union of Mine Workers some months ago, before the appointment of the electricity minister, saying if that is going to happen, that person must actually be someone who understands the politics in the energy sector itself. It must be someone who has a background in terms of engineering, in terms of like the technicalities in the ESCOM, in the energy sector. So it did happen that the president went ahead and appointed the minister that we are talking about. So we were saying it must not be a politician, it must be someone with integrity who has qualifications to can do the job. But unfortunately, it went the other way around. Still, we are saying what we have observed so far as the NUM. We have seen the minister going all around the power stations to inspect, to check what is happening there and what can be done. But we are getting reports that are fighting each other. Like initially, the minister, he was in favor of what we call is it the mixed energy?
Yeah.
If I can call it
Green
like
energy,
that,
renewable
IPPs
energy.
and others. So right now is the person who's coming up to say the coal power stations must actually be left alone, and we are happy to hear that as the NUM. We have been saying that to say they mustn't touch those power stations. They must just leave them as they are. Actually, they must find an alternative of how to fight what they call pollutions. We have been saying that, and right now we are welcoming the fact that he's saying those power stations must be left alone. So in terms of going forward as the NUM, I'm still waiting to meet the minister, to sit down with him and to share notes where it is possible to actually give him what the NUM see as a solution in terms of the current situation that we are facing of power cuts and all those things. Yes, it's a crisis, it's a serious crisis, but we are saying as the NUM, unfortunately, the poor workers that are working there day in and day out are not being compensated accordingly. They are making sure that the least we can at least have that little electricity that can push the country going forward. But we are saying we still need to meet the minister. We have met Minister Pravin Gordhan. We shared notes with him. We are looking forward to have the minister and sit down with him.
After the break, we bring back Mr. Terry Bell into the conversation. This time, we are asking the role of labor unions in addressing the challenges of employees. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with Luphert Chilwane and Terry Bell. Mr. Bell, I want to bring you back into the conversation. Earlier, sometime last year, I remember having you on along with Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, and we asked the same question: the role of labor unions in addressing the challenges of employees. Now, more than ever, in an economy which is moving towards, as you mentioned earlier on, the introduction of artificial intelligence and so much more. How important now are labor unions in making sure that the rights of employees still matter in the workplace?
The role of unions now, not traditionally, but of the idea of organized labor is more important now, I think, than any other time in our recent history, or in our history for that matter. We now face a situation, the way modern unions emerged, for example, in the United States, started at the time of what was then called the Great Depression, which was in 1873, and it lasted for 5 years. And it resulted in more and more unemployment, more and more anger, more and more anarchy, more and more poverty. The same thing that is happening now. And out of this, organized labor emerged. Organized labor is essential, but it's not just now because we have moved technologically ahead because of artificial intelligence, mechanization, automation, and in this case, Luphert Chilwane will know in NUM, they're using more and more mechanized mining, etc. So one man can do the job of 20 or 30. And that means greater productivity. But the productivity means greater profits, but it doesn't go to the workers, whether they're employed or unemployed. It goes straight back to the mine owners yet again. And one thing that gets me, they say, Asina Mali is the big thing. We have no money. What nonsense. You know, in the apartheid days, the corporate tax was 48%. It's 27% now. I mean, that's ridiculous. They say, oh, but if we put up the tax, these people will leave the country. You know, you cannot pick up a mine and stick it in your back pocket and push off to America or Europe or whatever. No, they would put up with it. Of course, they'll fight with it. Government is the management structure of a capitalist system. It's a system we're stuck with at the moment. If whenever we change it, that's different. But while we have it there, the unions are vital to protect the poorest, the most oppressed, and the most poverty-stricken sectors of our community, because that's where workers come from. They don't come from the leafy suburbs. A few of them might, to managerial positions, but the majority of workers live in what we still call the townships, the high-density areas, the shacklands. The majority of workers in this country who are lucky enough to have jobs are still being paid less in a year than many managers in big corporations are paid in a week or a day even. Since Luphert Chilwane did mention Stillwater, I mean, we can look at what people were there were paid and what directors are paid. We're told, oh, we have to have these top people paid at international levels. Why? We are living in South Africa. We don't have to, if we're going to do this international level thing, why not have workers paid at the same international level instead of having workers paid at what are called South African rates and the very bosses paid at international rates? It's a nonsense. So we do have the money, is a nonsense, but we also don't have any direction. And this is what is frightening. There is no policy, no proper policy put forward. In fact, I cannot think of any coherent macroeconomic policy being put forward by anyone since 1996, when the combined trade union movement put forward a quite sensible document called Social Equity and Job Creation. Okay, it needs to be updated now, but nonetheless, we haven't had anything like that. We have one contradiction after another. We have rampant corruption, and that's because of incompetence. We have people buying off so-called cadre deployment. You put someone into a position not because they can do the job, but because they have enough people behind them to give you the votes. It's a terribly dangerous situation. Something has to be done, and one of the vehicles, the social vehicles that can do this and should do this, is the trade union movement.
Mr. Chilwane, for somebody, you know, sitting in the NUM, I mean, you a lot of the times on the ground listening to the plea and the concerns of the workers. Now, I want to take Sibanye-Stillwater as a classic example. It's 11 years on, come August, since the Marikana massacre, and yet we still see no real improvement, especially in that community. We hear the CEO of Sibanye-Stillwater, Mr. Neil Froneman, pocketing what is over 300 million rand, could be more. And you have workers who all they want is just a basic salary, a basic increase in an economy which continues to get even worse for them when high inflation rates, high costs of living, and all they're asking for is to try and survive. How important is the NUM's role in making sure that they can fight for the rights of the workers, that they can fight for those workers who are all asking to live in a humane environment?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's very, very disgusting. And with regard to what we have just mentioned now, the Sibanye CEO getting 300 million rand we did really issue out our concern about that, and we are seeing those things happening on a daily basis. It is true by what Terry is saying. Those big managers there are being paid a lot of money at the expense of workers, and as the NUM, we are actually trying our level best to fight that through out, to say it cannot be fair to have a CEO earning, like such kind of money. And another thing that I can just share with you, we are at present busy fighting the Anglo-American Platinum, which has actually issued out their intentions to move out from what it is called mine health and safety to act to occupational health and safety, which is really something that is we regard as escaping from taking full responsibility from accidents that are happening in the mines. Because if the Anglo-American can manage to do that without being challenged, we are looking at workers dying like flies. The occupational health and safety, it's being managed by the Department of Labor, which in our view, it's that department is ineffective. And if they can manage to move that into the hands of the Labor Department, we are really seeing a situation that is going to be very touching. But nonetheless, we have taken that. We are challenging that decision by Anglo-American, and we are looking forward to win that case, because we don't want to see workers dying like as fly, dying like on a daily basis in deep down in the mines. So in terms of what Terry has actually mentioned, really the situation is in South Africa, it's getting even worse than it was before. Like we are talking about inequalities that are taking place, whether it's pay inequality, gender inequality. It's like we are witnessing a lot of things. Things are very bad at the workplace.
Mr. Bell, I think it's clear for us to say that we are in a capitalist society in South Africa. I think we all three can agree on that. Now, within a capitalist society, one would ask that government needs to play a much more harder role in supposedly clamping down on these multinationals, especially for the rights of workers. Do you see that happening under this current leadership?
No, not at all. But the point is that most governments are merely the management structure for the capitalist system. The people who really call the shots, nobody within a company decides, we're going to retrench so many workers, etc. They don't take it to government or they take it to the voters. No, not at all. We have a partial, I don't think there's any democracy anywhere in the world. I think they're just a series of hypocrisies. We have a limited democracy. Putting a cross on a ballot paper every 5 years is a nonsense. You have 5 seconds of democracy where you make a decision and the political party goes ahead. Now, government, yes, should intervene, and this is where a united union movement, workers have the power of their labor. They still have that power. It still exists. It's diminishing rapidly because of mechanization, automation, and artificial intelligence, the use of algorithms, etc. But it is still there. Workers can still withhold their labor as the major power that they have. But they can only do that if they're united. There's an old Chinese thing where an old man stood up with 7 sticks and he said, look, these are 7 brothers, and he snapped each one. He then took the 7, he said, but if they stand together, you cannot break them. And that is the truth. And that's what needs to happen, is pressure needs to be put on government, which is now under the sway. Let's face facts. We have a president who's a billionaire who owns McDonald's, etc., let alone the Ankoli cattle. We have the seamless movement of trade unionists moving from, and this happened from NUM as well, with Sokwana, present trade union leader, Labour Minister rather, is Tulis Nese of SADTU, the teachers union. The seamless move through the trade union movement into Parliament, into the ministerial post. Ministerial post, don't forget, with your perks, is over 3 million rand a year. And then moving seamlessly into big business. I mean, the classic being John Copeland and Marcel Golding and people like that, Irene Charnley, who are now millionaires, billionaires, etc. So that is something we should be aware of, and the union should be trying to put a brake on that. They can only do that if they stop being fragmented, and we're badly fragmented at the moment, if they stop being the tail trying to wag the ANC and government dog. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And they should go back to the early days, to not just 73, but into the 80s, and the debates in 1992, 1993, saying, look, government will be ANC, but the government is the biggest employer in the country. Should a trade union or a trade union federation be in bed with an employer, whether it's government or private? No. And I think that is what always unions should have realized. It was a mistake made a long time ago. It needs to be rectified. But also, we need to get away from the business unionism that's developed, the authoritarianism that's developed, and to build a new democratic, accountable trade union movement from the bottom up. That's what we need, and to stop the fragmentation. We actually need that desperately, because it's one of the few things that can actually bring about some sort of positive change on the so-called better life for all.
Mr. Chilwane, I need to give you just 2 minutes on this because I have to get your take on this. Just respond to what Mr. Bell had said. Can unions have that power to really make sure that they challenge government in making reforms which are in a position of power for the workers?
Look, yes, I totally agree with Terry. The power of unity of workers, it's sacrosanct. I can really assure you. And we are urging that workers must actually always remain united. We have done that, you remember, with Sibanye Stillwater last year, where workers went on strike for almost a month or 2 months. We were united. We went into those wage negotiations with AMCU. We agreed on our unity, and we have done it again with NUMSA at the energy sector, which is ESCOM. The unity of workers cannot be undermined, and I can tell you, with all those challenges that we are facing right now, the only thing that we need is for workers to unite across different union movements.
After the break, we wrap up the conversation with Mr. Chilwane and Mr. Bell. This time we are talking bargaining councils and the powers employees have when they enter. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. On Monday, obviously during the national holiday known as Workers' Day, I heard someone call on and talk about the bargaining council and when they enter labor courts or the CCMA, the role of bargaining councils. And this caller seemed very pessimistic about entering it because he felt that he really had no power as an employee due to various factors that the employer holds in terms of its strength. Mr. Chilwane, I want to come to you on this question first. How much power do employees have enshrined in the Constitution with regards to the bargaining council, and what positives can be taken from an employee's perspective when they do enter a bargaining council, whether it be challenging a case of unfair dismissal or even that of an increase in his or her salary?
Look, what I can safely say is that for the past years, actually, we have been witnessing situations where employers come into the bargaining negotiations with anger. They come there trying to intimidate workers Actually, they are just people who are angry. We don't know what is really happening. I'm giving you an example of our engagement with ESCOM on our first round of wage negotiations. Already, the employer is showing arrogancy. It's showing it's negotiating in bad faith. The negotiators are angry. We don't know what is happening. I'm sure we'll get into that. We'll get into understanding what is happening with them when we enter into the second round of wage negotiation. But we've already stated our case, and we said those ESCOM negotiators who are being sent there, they must just be they must just step aside. There must be a fresh team that comes there with the intention of understanding what the negotiations are all about, and actually understanding what the reasons why our members are demanding such wage increases. So, in short, I can say things have changed drastically in terms of the approach into wage negotiations. I think it's because people that are being sent there are actually people who don't even understand what are the negotiations it's all about.
Mr. Bell, in a capitalist society, the rhetoric has always been, well, if you don't like what we're offering you, there's the door, please go out. That's unfair because the workers' plight is not being listened to, and there seems to be no common ground between employer and employee. And the state that we are in allows for that to happen. Surely that has to change.
Well, the point is that it's always going to be the case, especially when you have a situation of economic crisis, which you have now, and a bit of a pressure on profits. And what happens then is, well, we want to make more. There's constant pressure now with inflation, etc., for the companies also to make more profits. And the way you do that is to squeeze the workers by not giving them greater increases, by not getting rid of them, by retrenching, etc. So that's always going to be the case. In the case of ESCOM, etc., where you're talking about a state-owned enterprise, we also have a situation where the trade union movement, the labor movement as a whole, does not trust government, because in 2018 they did a deal where government actually pushed the unions, the majority of them, unfortunately again, and these were COSATU unions who made up just the majority, and for a 3-year deal. The unions didn't want that. They wanted a 1-year deal. But finally, they persuaded Nihawu and the others to come in. PSA and the others stood out. So 51 or 52% said, right, we'll do the 3-year deal. When it came to the 3rd year, the government reneged on it. It was a gross breach of contract. They got away with it on a technicality in law, but it was immoral, unjust, and it means that it's left a sour taste in the mouths of all the workers right across the board. So they don't trust. Now you have a situation in ESCOM where, for want of proper maintenance, of corruption at the highest level, it's not the workers who made the mess of this thing. Now, the very people who made the mess are now trying to make the workers pay for it. Well, can't pay for it because they've made such an incredible mess of it. But nonetheless, make the workers, again, suffer more when they're not really responsible. So it's a very awkward situation. Why don't they come up with a proper series of policies about how we get out of this present severe crisis? And it is severe. I mean, I don't think many people have yet come to realize what it will mean if we have a complete blackout, 24 hours. It will create havoc. Once again, the miners, and the mines are already making provision, they'll have their electricity taken care of. But ordinary people, already the people who've really suffered are the townships, in the small traders, the people who relied on that little bit of electricity, the little bakers and people like that. They're out of business, they're broke, they're starving, they're hungry. We need somebody to come up with policies, and they need to combine with the unions and not see themselves as trying to make the workers pay for the mistakes they've made.
Gentlemen, I have 2 minutes each to give to you, and we'll start with you, Mr. Bell. It's a simple question, and that question stems from the conversation I heard on Monday with regards to the pessimism regarding the May Day rally, the pessimism with regards to workers. There's some really don't really take it that seriously. As enshrined in our constitution, do employees in South Africa still enjoy the rights of the workers? Mr. Bell.
Yes, we do. We still have on paper the labor laws. They're in place. What happened, as I say, with the breach of contract over that last thing, which is still being fought, we're going to have to put that as water under the bridge, because that was a battle that was lost. It should never have been lost. The combined labor movement should have come out and said, we're not putting up with this, because it's a total undermining of the whole idea of collective bargaining. It undermines everything to do with getting together, whether it's in a bargaining council or wherever. So I think we still have the laws there. We have to use them. But at the same time, we've got to ensure that even the Registrar of Trade Unions, they've been waiting for more than a year to get their computer program fixed, their computer system fixed. Everything is coming adrift. And it's not the responsibility of workers, it's the responsibility of the management, and that is government in this case. And they better come up with something soon, or we're in real dire trouble.
Mr. Chilwane?
Yes, I also want to agree with Terry. The workers, they are still enjoying their workers' rights. But what is really puzzling is the inconsistencies of labor policies that are making those rights, those workers, they are making it hard for those workers to enjoy those rights. We are talking about, just for an example, Terry placed it very well, to say that the incompetencies that are happening in all the various sectors, actually, they are making it very hard for workers to enjoy them, because we are talking about the situations where workers end up being blamed for the incompetencies that are happening within those sectors. So it is still a long way to go, but we can safely say that as NUM, we are making sure that those workers are enjoying their rights the way they should be.
Mr. Terry Bell, Mr. Luphert Chilwane, gentlemen, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us here on Talking Point. Much appreciated.
Thank you for giving us our that time.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Terry Bell, a labor analyst, and Luphert Chilwane, the National Union of Mine Workers media officer, talking with regards to the May Day rally that took place and just the rights of workers as the economy still reels from various issues, the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, the war that is currently happening in Russia and Ukraine, but most importantly, the energy crisis that continues to wreak havoc in this country. And the workers, the employees, the men and women who wake up every day, early in the morning, to put the basic human rights on the table in their house, still is under threat. The question is, will there be any change to that? And does this government have the stomach to make sure that they fulfill the rights of the workers? That remains to be seen. That's all we have for you here on a Talking Point from myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team. We say Jazakallah to you for joining us. We'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.